basic contention. My basic contention is that we're very confused. Not only us, but a lot of early Eden from maybe a few hundred years, possibly, or more, are very confused. And this being confused is a very shortish confusion. The whole idea is to try to find what's the actual shortish of the confusion. Is it like because of certain kashas that people had that made them say different things, or because of certain concepts that changed, and so on? Now, my assumption is, so what do I mean by confused? What I mean is that there's all kind of people, right? There's usually we think of a spectrum of like more maminim people, less maminim people. I don't know how you want to call it. Okay, they advise the very frimme keli. They schrei one thing. They advise, let's say, and so on. The less frimme say we don't know. How could you know? Maybe this is nonsense. Maybe everything's only about reality and nature and so on. I'm talking about everyone that's still not someone that's not is but I mean everyone within a certain frame of like I'm religious. Yeah, and my assumption is that both of these people are very totally confused. Not both, all 5 of them. I somehow had a list. In other words, what are different things that people say? One kind of person says, I could give you sources from the last week for each one of these things. They've stereotypes in my head, but then I actually read a little from the Gilyonis, and you see that everything has someone that Mamish says it like I could use it like as a beautiful exhibit for these shittas. One shitta is, you don't understand God. God is smarter than us and bigger than us, and that's a menepshita, and good. It gets put into a pusik vida mahar. No shaykh is what the pusik actually meant ever, or what any Rishon or Achron ever said about that pusik, but okay, something like that. Okay, that's one shitta. Now this shitta is basically another shitta. I think Nacha different shitta says is. What do you mean? We know the Rambam says they have to be toilet things in Chatoim, so we have to find what to be decided, and we do know which it is, we don't know which it is, but we have to and so on. That's a second kind of frimme thing. A third kind of frimme thing is we have to believe, which is related to the first kind, we have to believe that everything is really good, although it looks bad. We have all kinds of ways of saying that it's good, or we just have to believe that it's really good, and so on. And some people even have brutum in that. They say some kind of nonsense, like really it's amtokas adinim, verstehst? But it's somehow amtokas adinim. Maybe more people should have died, and this was mechaper on other people. So that's where it comes into a good thing somehow. Verstehst? You could always frame things in crazy ways. Like everything could be, everything is relative. So somehow this could be seen as look at me, come on. Anyways, but there's such concepts. I'm not saying tzaddik mechap. But you have to understand all these concepts. Firstly, you have to know what you're talking about. You can't just make but more yesodistic, what I want to get at is that all of these people, none of them seem to naturally think so. They're all being mizgabe. There always comes with a l'chayre. L'chayre we do understand. L'chayre we have a kasha on God. Let's say that's the first shit there. L'chayre we have a kasha. V'yashloime, shtoik, don't ask kashas on God. We love God anyways, or we don't ask kashas, right? L'chayre looks like, or same like the guy that I want to be medayik, that this guy that says that it's the kingdom is really saying the same thing, but not the same thing, because very different. Because if you say I don't understand, then God is always right. I don't understand anything, but I have some kind of a minipshita, whatever. Then you're saying that you don't understand. If you're saying that, like some people say both Shimach is both things. I'm just trying to note that it's totally opposite theories. That's things that we can understand. That's a science. Maybe it's not a science, revealed science. It's a hidden science, esoteric science of Gilim. But it's things that it does make sense. And in theory, at least, if you would be then you would understand it. It would make total sense. It wouldn't even have any kashas. So that's total different ways of thinking. Very roots na chachma, like the Ramam whole time. Very madgish this, right? You could say it's just God's will and has no meaning. That's really what the shittas and menepshita means. Or you could say I don't understand. That's very different. Two different things. I mean, it's you could understand. Maybe sometimes we don't understand, and this time I don't, and so on. That's yeah. So then it's not pshita at all. It's nothing pshita. It's just I'm dumb. I know. I think sometimes some people, the smarter ones, actually chop that it means that in principle can be understood, not only in pink. Because I think that they realize. I'll tell you. I'm thinking of a certain person. I don't want to name names, but he explicitly told me, Gilgilim is a teretz. Seriously, you understand that teretz? He said, "Mekibel, if I start Gilgilim, it doesn't verämpfer the kasha. It just makes the kasha bigger." Not teretz. Elamai. I mean, in other words, it doesn't understand it. In the end, is in principle something not understandable. Not with one more, episode, with one more Gilgul will verämpfer it. Doesn't actually verämpfer. So I do think that it's that some people do understand it up to that level. Some people are just confused beside that. And then there's the Victor Miller said, or the Rebbe about how, what do you mean? Torah says, and therefore, I, cautious, same, doesn't matter. We're gonna decide that it's because you're not sneistic or whatever, and that's the truth. Now, all of these people, they all have a timer, right? Timer, 2000 timers, right? I'm right now talking about all the Fribe people, right? The right-wing people, okay? There's basically two Shahaim, 3 or 4, right? Two klunistic. One is Shettes Chava, like in the Holocaust context, it would be the victim of the Shette and the Sam Rebbe's Shette, that they say, I don't know what you want. It's a schwere kasha. It's nothing new. We have an old tradition since the times of Rimi Anovi. And it says in the Rambam, it says in here, and that will be the beginning of El Moshe Mazois Yisrael Goy. The minute was to say a mitzvah after a chat, after a problem happened, and here I am saying the mitzvah that I think should be said today. And I'm not. I want to be very clear that he has to emphasize for doing it. He has to justify it. With this whole Mazois Yisrael Goy, Mazois Yisrael Goy, that didn't say Mazois Yisrael Goy. I don't know if that's his language, something similar. They just obviously said that. They didn't say the Imi Anovi didn't tell Zechovai Drusha and said, I know what you're thinking. This is where is God? But you should know that we have Moshe Rabbani told us that there's Chava Enesh, and we have to believe. He didn't say that. He just said it straight, right? A very big difference between being misgaber on something and like Afal Pekan I'm gonna believe, and just saying it. That the scientists don't have to be misgaber. There's the kasha, the pshat, the secularist or atheist. They never have say, I know that you think there's a God, but Tviyah Shloime there isn't, No, he says you're crazy if you think that. Maybe the people think that, but they're mistaken. Look, and the Pashtas is like me, right? It's a very big difference. Also in the way of understanding the idea, and I think in the way the idea gets understood because of this. I want to get to this, very important. And when someone that says it, betar afal piken, betar is gabris. I think that this movement itself, but you understand it 4 ways. Like, and so in the first way, that's one way. I said the second way would be someone that says nish schayvonish, because more like that there's like the Rayyat says on the Holocaust. I don't say schayvonish, doesn't make sense to me. Basically says that, but I'm not. But in Sturas Darkei Hashem, right? And Sturas Darkei Hashem, Betoicha do 2 ways. Which is really not Sturas Darkei Hashem. So it's totally third way, but somehow gets connected in people's mind at the same thing, right? Like Gilgilim and Tekin and Neshamas. Techer and Yunim is, but really it's 3 things. But I think in reality and socially it's the same. It can be collapsed into the same kind of people, the same kind of things make people say that. Right? That's the flim. And then there's people that try to, okay, let's leave, well, I can't stop and do it. Right? And then there's 3. Yeah? Three. Yeah, and there's 3 different things that I said. 3 different things. It's really only two people that say 3 different things. Okay? I don't know if you know more kinds of things that people say. You tell me. I think there's a 4th kind of person, which is the left-wing person. Sorry for using like very not the right terms. That say that we don't understand, and there's different things that we could say. Either no, if you're epikoides, if there's no God, then of course there's no kasha. I'm not. That's a guy that we're not talking about. That's maybe we should talk about him, but not worried about him today. That's a guy in Betar. We can't look in the Ramam to figure something out about that guy. That's a different problem. No, the 4th guy would be the guy that says, I did try to write. Say, yeah, there's basically two ways that I saw, and with the left-wing guys. One way is to say a Rambamist style mahalach that says yes, there is. In other words, they start with nature, natural causes as the most simplistic thing, and then Achilles Dakash and the Torah says other things. They say no, the Torah when it says Vayim Shemaya means natural in natural ways. How will make some gedrikt doichik to be the Rambam literally does such things sometimes. The Rambam says Right, by prime examples, the Rambam says the Chavmas Mikdash was because people were Ivda with the Zura. How? Because if you're Ivda with the Zura, then you go to astrologer. Instead of preparing for war, you were busy with Chayza B'Gechovim, and obviously that's not a way to prepare for war, so of course you will lose the war to the guy that actually has tanks. That's, I get us the Rambam, and I think it's Negeres Taimon. One of the letters. Rambam literally says this. So that's like a modern pshat, but it's identify that with the Tchavayon of the Torah. Someone would say, or I could say it in a very friendly way. You could say this. Actually, you don't think it's a crazy thing to say. B'fnei atzma. What do you mean? Chazal say megal on makah. Chazal trying to work with some of the problem. Megal and choyval de chayiv, right? What's the chayiv? What's the chov of this chayiv? Yesterday there navayre. I think that at least one understanding is that to get today there navayre. In other words, from that you deserve to be a murderer. The other guy deserved to die. No shaykhs to that, because it's not fair that he died because he was under a mak. But let's say it's the same guy. In other words, you understand the problem with Chazal is just that it's two different people. One did the avayra and one dies. It leads here the same guy went on his own roof without the mak and died. Then we don't have the problem of the ruin because that avayra was what made him ruin to die, right? That's what I'm saying, right? So it's obviously not crazy. I don't know why. I mean, I know why, but I wouldn't, just giving an example of this like fourth pshat, it wouldn't be crazy to say, maybe the Rebbe has such a drusha that says, and because there's no misduachiv to machen ma'ake, and we'll brighter us at least ma'ake, it means generally to have safe gates or whatever. And since you didn't, so people died. It's not einish on that. Naturally, it's not einish on that. You could even make like chiddush pshat like that. It's a din, okay. That's still trying to connect that to the. That's one modern way to do.
It's not connecting it to something. It's understanding it and like.
Yeah, but it's sort of doing a move that Rambam and his fans do a lot of time, which I think is a very defensible move. I'm not against it, but it's sort of like mamash identifying the seemingly magical meaning derichnes causality of the Torah with the literal science. Nicht dass zwei Sachen ist dieselbe Sach. Hadu yidchsiv. They say the guy that said if you're not going to navigate you're going to die. Hadu yidchsiv vayim shemaya. That's one way of making a shilluv. I can defend it at length and different times. Just saying. Now then there's a fifth way, which I know other people that I know try to do that usually, which is to say it doesn't really have a shaykh. Of course, people die because of whatever, mikra or whatever random the world. Afal bekan is that for Yiddish Shemaim, take things seriously. We could talk mitzad with the lechavayder because you have to care. We could talk mitzad b'nem lamokam. You have to pretend that. I don't know exactly what the people say phenomenology, different words. We have to act as if God run the world at this level of detail, though it might not be actually literally true. It's still there's a psamisse boifn from science, something like that. There's a scientific kick, and then there's the moral kick, which is what the Rambam means when he says el chastanes and so on, and two dinim, such can stira. That's another. These two ways are very basic two ways of reconciling Torah and science, religion and science, and not only in this noise and in basically every noise. There's these two ways, at least. Maybe there's more ways. So yeah, tzad hashuva from all of these people, all of them mit chilavatzov, especially the frimme ones, it's easier to show. But of course, the less frimme ones, it's not certain. In other sense, even easier to see that they're dealing with a problem here, right? In other words, if he wouldn't have this Rambam that Nebuch Machim and Shike, he would have just said, yeah, whatever Goy says, and next use on Machna Beserish gate. Now that he has a Rambam, he has to have for it. So if he's very for him and is ready to throw away the whole cycle for Kovadas for him, Mamish say, man, tu nicht sagen. If he's a little less for him, he'll say, ja, sagen in medaf, or is say even more, more radical things. But all of them are not whatever we could call yashre, something like called yishre lef simcha. It's not glat. None of these things are glat. All of these things are like a sirche, was mat aufgeblasen, and it's not really a sirche. Like, come on, it's nicht bes Yosef's glat, no. You're asking, right? Yeah. All of them are like squinting. Like if you squint, which means, and I think that this squinting is a huge issue. That's really my speech last week. I would rather have kfira that's direct than all these amena me'ilits with all these oines, like imetz halev. Because it causes, and you could see, and the more you do it, the more you get so, you forget. And I know that the word naturally and directly is very fraught word. It's not so simple to say, be natural and so on. But you lose a certain midas emes. It's like lemad l'shencha. You're not allowed. I don't know the language that I'm thinking of. Like there's such a thing not to be margal yourself to lie. Even when lies, let's say it's mitter to lie, let's say it's a chiyuv to lie, but you forget what truth is. I feel like a lot of people have said so many fancy, complicated, like they forget what simple truth is. And my big contention is, again, number one, in the moral sense, I think that I would rather someone say I have no clue. Even the guy that's, for example, anyone that's consistent in a certain sense, that I think a lot of this has to do with midas. More the Ramam says that, a condition for Asuga is to have midas toivus. A lot of people don't understand shaykhs, midas toivus. I think it has a lot of shaykhs. I think that a lot of these things I showed. I did find some one year they said that my friend he said that there's a Chivas Radvaz. Someone asked Radvaz. I had a Chiva here. We should look at this Chiva, but in a second. There's a Chivas Radvaz that someone asked Radvaz that he doesn't want to be misabel because someone died, and I said so why would he be misabel? And Radvaz hacks him around there that it's shkavek. I don't have to remember exactly the language of the Radvaz. He says that he doesn't agree with this theory.
Why not? Yeah.
So it's a good question. Why not, right?
Yeah.
So I know what to say, but I want to look it up. But the kid said he said that V'Shem is Rebbe that he said as someone who asked this question, he didn't ask this question because he's such a man and come out of Rachmon Latafa. But he asked this question because he's not a tzayach. I'm a shiggin, a guy without a heart. I eat breaknish zechikashes. I eat glad doch that I wish to come out of Rachmon Latafa. He's actually of the radical opinion. He's the radical opinion that we don't ask any kashes. He doesn't even have a pshat. He doesn't think Gilgilim is a teret and so on. But we don't have any kashes. But that doesn't mean that you should be an immense. If you're it says in the Rabbah, Misha and Ritlis Abel kun shtik nechom mezachze. It's not a made up thing. But yeah. Right, so I'm going to tell you, I told you this thing already, no? There's such a Radvaz, but the Radvaz is more based on the Ramban, I think. I can't find the Radvaz now, the second. I had it here the day before. All the people bring it. This thing, that was the word that I took from that. Okay, I don't know how to find it in a second. That was the word that I took from that it's not, you have to always, a lot of midas tov somehow, the things that we promote as good virtues have also bad reasons for them existing, and you have to know the truth. In other words, right, like it says and also in Rishonim already. Like Betochen and Atzlis have our cousins somehow, right? Not because they're the idea bechlal cousins. The idea they're no shaykhis. But sometimes a person says Betochen and really it's just like about Betochen. And so that you're a vikrit in a different case. You're not such a you're a foolish trick and you halt schon arbeiten. So you're saying that you're Betochen. And similarly, I think that in reality, again, before we talk about like the theory, in reality, there's a big difference between someone that's a lot of the people that are using all these things, like everything is good, seems to be mostly mitoch achzurius and not mitoch oibe femina b'chlal. So that's the first thing. But where do I get this? I'm confused. Ich halte mich jetzt mitten an eine andere Sache. So this is similar. Maybe this is similar to what I was saying, that it's very important not to lose simple things, including simple feelings and including simple. No, he said b'shem his Rebbe that he thinks that Misha Omer she'kol ma'avdru achman la'tavo, but therefore he's not mistabel le'om deragel v'arsina. So that's that lishon. It's kein Yid, it's kein Mensch. In other words, he understood very well that the problem is not that. That's a whole pilpul that maybe Misa is schlecht, Misa is ja schlecht. There's a Ramban about this. Nicht dort hype sich so. It starts with you have to be a Mensch, you have to be a Yid. He calls it a Yid, I could call it a Mensch. It's the same thing. If someone dies, someone close to you, then you have to be sad. Otherwise, you're a Mensch. There's an extra shmis. You could be the biggest mom that it's latav of kapshita and still be sad. That's really what he was getting at. And it's not a stira because it's really in a vibe from two different middas. There's a middah called menschlichkeit and there's a middah called amina. It's not stira. If they become a stira, then I'm going to be more choshid. It's like the Gemara says, you know, like nicht hares kailem de chamira nor shvichas dum de kila, right? You have to always remember that that's usually how it is. So that's my first thing. That was mostly my drush from last week. Where am I? My drush from this week is mostly it's not anywhere. It's to say that it's the same thing, but I'm talking even intellectually. You can't. We get used to saying a lot of things, but my big contention is that I think that everyone that ever said all these things that all these people quote, all of them, to the extent that serious people said them, and it totally made sense. It wasn't something they have to kneit sich the stirn and say, "Steht the stoß ein Apfel bekannt zu sein." If it's Apfel bekannt, then it's not straight. Of course, it could be an Apfel. It could be there's a Havaman. It could be, but you didn't think like that, and I'll explain you. But after I'll explain you, it will be natural to you. It will make sense. And I think that that's a big shmira against a lot of shtissim. And things that are shtissim, not only against shtissim, it also means, that's one thing. It doesn't let you do things that are obviously wrong. You know, like a lot of, you know, Rabbi Belsky used to say about the Eiref, other things, he said, you can't prove that something is absurd. If someone doesn't have seichel, that something that's meshig is, then there's a very big problem here. And I think that's because we're already used to the thing like being absurd. Yeah, I mean, it was absurd. So there's no way for me to show you, wait, but here you've applied it wrong, because this is obviously nuts. There's never such a step where it's obviously nuts, because you thought that the whole idea is to be nuts. So how could I stop you at being nuts? So that's one. If it's not theoretically, if it's not midas, and so on. And second thing is that it doesn't let you understand the thing in itself, because you're assuming that everyone that ever said something like this didn't make any sense. You're not even learning the Rambam. You look at the Rambam, everyone knows that Rambam is a cipher that you have to learn seriously. But no, if it's like Nunim Machshava that nobody understands anyways, and it seems like the Rambam says it seems like people already think that he actually means that. So how could you tell me that it's the pshat? What does he say here? What does he say there? What do you mean? This is like a minute. Minute is not supposed to make sense. And if it's not supposed to make sense, then you don't even get to understand it, what it says, before even agreeing or disagreeing. You don't even get to another way I would say it, if you have a cloud that you cannot apply the next logical, the next thing that comes out of it, logically, then you didn't understand it. You say, we don't understand this. Then what are you even saying? It doesn't mean anything, right? But kids, my big contention, that's all the Akdoma. That's why this is the same question that we whole time talk about. It all comes back. And the more I learn, and maybe I'm probably Meshechet, but I start to see that almost everything comes back to very same kind of questions. And what came that from them? So I do think that we could try to find some very basic things that actually make total sense. Again, in each person's system, people have their machloikes, but I think that my big contention is that up until the times of the Rishonim, I think, not all of them and so on, when people said things like that, they actually meant them. In other words, not that they didn't say it, but it actually made sense to him, and therefore there's prutim in that, and there's ways to connect it with other things, and there can be different shittas, but none of them have this kind of feeling where you seem like mizgabe to have him in. So if you take this example, right, the mushal, let me start somewhere. If you take this example, I want to show about this example, right? So we have this confusion about availus, and I want to start with availus, not with the chiva and all of that, right? So we have this whole confusion. Like I just saw it, one of the big cool ways to show that such a confusion, that there's mamash literally like a shmis and a raid in the achronim. If you have to be sad when you're oval. Kunid Rabbi Soloveitchik from Boston to tell us that he thinks that there is such a thing. Mazel, he was a shtickle normal man. So he was able to get the chitva to say that, yeah, he thinks the Rambam, he is a Raya, because otherwise, why is Yom Tov the Chaval is Shaykhis? That is Raya. The Gemara says that it's Simcha and whatever, ganze Essa the whole shmis over there in Medkut. And he says, what do you mean? According to your Pshat and Rasha, Availus is just doing things, or you can do it and then make a seder, Shaykhis. Was a Shaykhis that's Simchas Yom Tov. There is. You see that the Gedra Halacha does say that Availus says. Then yes, okay, nach Enfer and the Rasha and macht the ganze Pshatel. And I'm looking at this whole thing, I'm like, what's going on here? You need a riot to be sad. Like, what is this all about? And I just told you from the Gemara over there in Sikha, yeah, and the same on Bruchas also maybe, that said that they used the violence as an obvious example of someone that is Turret, just is not Turret to the mitzvah, so it's not always a mitzvah put to a mitzvah, just being sad. And being sad is not an excuse. It actually is an excuse to not put on film. By the way, can't forget that, right? This is Medem. Oh, it doesn't say Turret because I don't know exactly what. No, Einon is different. Einon is always a mitzvah technically, but the tefillin, that's what Rabbi Yochanan said. Oval put the Mekala mitzvahs. No, I have this thing here. Oval put the Mekala mitzvahs. No, where's the document that I was looking at? This guy's mama. It went away. Put the Mekala mitzvahs. Chitz min tefillin shenem ben pe'er. Ich treffe es nicht. I have too many stuff open and none of them are the right one. It says shenem ben pe'er, and Yecheskel said pe'er tachas ef, or something like that. What does this mean? This is like, if anyone that's not the Gemara would tell you this medrash, you would tell him that it's on reform, not the case. Tefillin is pe'er, and oval is obviously not a matzvah of pe'er, so you shouldn't put on tefillin. Something pirim to I don't know exactly what it means, but it actually does mean that this thing, like other mitzvahs, Krishma actually has to say, but tefillin passt nicht. Tefillin, like you say al piyari, tefillin is meichen de gadlus, oval is obviously not meichen de gadlus. Right? Now, of course, we're not even noyig this, and people do think that you could have meichen de gadlus when you're oval and so on. Okay. Slechtin. I think that's part of the whole thing. Okay, that goes back to the other shmis. But Bekitzer, here, Availas Belev, he brings this whole Nakeda. What does it say? No, what's the Gemara? The Gemara Duktachtes, yeah? Well, this is the Gemara in second. Schlich mit Pshat Leis Kibel Mitzvah. Mekan Amerikan Zazile. Omar Avina Mader. Chishis Abkarishis. Yuchya Filokoin is Alman Anam. It's the whole Pshat because the Gemara is going back and forth between if it's because it's a mitzvah or if it's because he's studied, right? And like in other words, and what's the difference? If it's only about the mitzvah, then a kind of Salman and Koch dasselbe mitzvah. The mitzvah had the tirde, as I bezoi then Tavis mitzvah yam yami, right? Then we have to you need both, and it's be tirde the mitzvah. That's basically the structure of the Gemara, right? Right? So again, like I said, if Oval would not be sad, then this would not be a Raia. Oval, I know it's Star. Shaykhis, not Turid. My Oval is obviously Turid. From Bezarah, that it's a Tird. Now, of course, Rashi is Oval obviously Turid. Why it's stuck? It's the other mitzvah from Availas. So, according to me, we could stomach the fan for that. The Gemara holds that Availas is not Mederaisa. It's not like us. If we would think that Availas, I'm not sure that Availas is actually Mederaisa. I think it's a very complicated thing because of this problem. Because there's no Hilchas Availas in the Torah. All the you see, the Gemara that the Gemara brings from Availas are so random and so on, so such schwache Rayas. And we learn halachas from, and then there's this psikim from Aharon and so on. Very few. There's no parshas Availas. Let's be real. And when the Torah wants to say halacha, it knows how to say it. I know that the Torah Shel Peh usually works differently, but I think they're always for this kind of reasons, because it's things that were simple. We didn't have to write it. I think just like the Ramam says, okay, this is much bigger shmis, but just like the Ramam says, the Mishnah doesn't say hilchas tefillin because everyone knows how to put on tefillin. I think the Pusik doesn't say things that everyone knows how to do. Most chadishim, even for example, let me give an example just to be clear. A very obvious example, get, right? How do you make a get? The whole get is from like 3 words. I know that someone saw that the Pusik, the most quoted Pusik in the Chimish and Shas, I once had a statistic sheet on this, is Kirkish Isov Eva.
Really?
Yeah.
Quoted Pusik in
Yeah.
Shas?
Yeah. Yeah. literally the pasuk that has the most drushes in the whole Shas is because this whole Masech is Gittin and the whole Masech is Gittin. In other words, it's quoted the most times. The whole Masech is Gittin, the whole Masech is Kedushin, half of Masech is are based on one pasuk. Like it's 3 psukim, literally. V'yatsa, v'aysa, v'yikach. Who? That.
Because the thing is, you wanted to show like the Talmud Torah,
yeah, but it's not a Raya. It's not on. So now listen. What do I think? What's going right? Because I'm going to say the opposite. Of course, because there are other. The Gemara talks about this. There's some psukim that have a lot of halachas, right? I noticed this. But Bekitza, what I think is that if you read, but this pasuk, let's be real. That parsha is not parshas Gittin. It's not parshas Kedushin. It's parshas Machzek Rishus, right? The whole thing is just a story, right? From every word in the story, Madaik. How do you make a get and how do you get married? And why do you make a get?
Yeah, the whole thing is
it's all like Doma, Lagiash, Layikach, Layach the Balarish and the Kachta. In other words, the Torah Al Pipshat is assuming this is things Masim B'chol Yom, it's like a shade. I mean, Mechadash you what you didn't know yet. What didn't you know yet? You didn't know yet that there's Issa that you Machzek Rishus. Right? And I'm saying even more, if we wouldn't have this, we wouldn't even have these psukim. It's a mazel that we had to have this, because then we wouldn't know anything. We would just do the minig, whatever the minig is. How do you get married? However, with a cheppah, with a right? So Nachal 9, I don't know where I'm going. Same thing, Availus. Availus is just a thing that people do. We don't. I could show you Availus Midaraisa. I'm thinking they bring this pasuk, but it's another proof that just things that people do. It says by Moshe Rabbeinu, they were Masabel, ve'ifkə says so, ve'ifkə. So the Bechir, we can take. It's all nonsense because all these things. Again, where do we know it from? From Bayaz. Thanks, Shinish. It's from Masses. Right? Exactly, but all these things didn't start. It could be their mitzvahs, it could be their größe yichidim. I'm not saying all of these things. I'm just saying that the text doesn't start. You can't work. This is a very backwards way. If you're taking the most basic ingredients of human life and saying that, okay, the Torah assumes that you already know how to be mis'abel. Well, I'm giving him a chiddush. Well, you didn't know. You didn't know, for example, right? Half of the Hilchos Aval is learned from Yecheskel. When we told him, you're not going to be mis'abel. And it's a shalaf, if it's mamash and aviyah, or if it's a mitzvah, or it's just saying that you're not going to have time, whatever. That's what it means. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't. It means that you won't, because it will be such a schwere tzad, so you won't have time to mis'abel and so on. But in other words, again, from this we see what the minig was, what the derech olam is, what the namal is.
Well, why do you have to learn it after they forgot what it was?
No, because this is derech Chazal always. They always want to bring a pasuk for everything. That's their reference. I don't think if they don't, they actually do. You know, when Chazal don't stop, when they're stuck somewhere, they say Aloch l'mash b'sina, or they say ich weiß nicht. They sometimes they get stuck and they say this is still true even though there's no pasuk for it. But otherwise, I think Aloch l'mash b'sina is basically that. It's like the stopgap for things that don't say. How do you know how to make tefillin? Aloch l'mash b'sina. What do you mean? We have tefillin. It's the Moshe Rabbeinu. What kind of question is this even? So of course it's Aloch l'mash b'sina. I'm not saying it's not true that it's Aloch l'mash b'sina. It's just a kind of thing that we don't have to write down. Why do you have to write it down? Other Aloch l'mash b'sina is more complicated. This is a good example. Shin shal tefillin Aloch l'mash b'sina. Whatever. A bunch of Aloch tefillin Aloch l'mash b'sina. What does it mean? Your father had tefillin. Your side had tefillin. Why you ask me how to say in a pasuk? It says we'll make tefillin. So that's the tefillin. It's such a kind of thing. Okay, Nachle Nani.
He's not saying where it came from. It was understood that
it's saying that Aloch Mashtina means a halacha that doesn't have to say in the pasuk. It's not a drusha. That's the every touch. Besides for if it's the Rais or the Rabbon and all kinds of things, it means a halacha. That's just a halacha. Sometimes they use just the word halacha. And earlier in Chazal, just some halachas are drushas. Maybe some of them are not mamash b'sina or machalish from a medrash, or even they are, but they're merimas in the pasuk. This is halacha. That's not merimas in the pasuk. It's only mekibel. But most of the this is the nacha. It's getting us into a lot of other things. Back to where I am, I think that availus is one of the most basic human things. It's crazy to look for like God. Of course, when we do the Gemara does man availus not I'm not saying, but that's what the Gemara is looking for is for the din. When we like I was saying last week, all halacha is about figuring out the limits of something. Okay, if it's with the rise, then we know we have to be there. If it's not, it's all about deciding, what's the din of availus, but the actual availus. That's what the tzar. That's exactly what Rashi says. The tzar is mitzvah. The tzar is before. It's bigger than a mitzvah. It's and therefore, so that's. Now I wanted to show.
It's like the thing that we're dealing with. It's the given. Like,
exactly.
It's the given.
Exactly. And of course, since we're already lost, maybe it's too long, so we have to be chazir and v'yazdim because we forgot some of these things. I'm not saying. So we struggle about a lot of these things. The same thing about. I could give you better examples, right? Karbonis, right? The Rambam already says he doesn't know how karbonis work, but the Torah never explains what karbonis are. It just tells you halachas. You read the Parsvei Imen. If you want to bring a carbon oil, then let me give you verschiedene halachas. In other words, have a minute, she bring carbon oil stam from anything. Carbon oil has to be when a zocha, and so on has to be. It's all pruti halachas. The actual carbon, does it say, yesh dover kazeh carbon that works like this? Everyone knows. Now, of course, if we don't know, then we're stuck making up stuff because we don't know. Or we just try to get into their head and see. But the Torah doesn't say these things. The same thing is very with availus, and you could see the Torah references availus. And like, I even for example, I think this is number one. And this is, I want to say a shtickle like shir on Gidre Avalis. The first Gidre Avalis is that you're sad, like it says. And how do I know? By the way, there is a posting in the Torah that the Fetish mentions Avalis, and that's a Parashas Kisatz also. That's the halacha of, no? We did say a chiyuv to make Avalis, and Fetish and chiyuv to make Avalis in the Torah. The only place where it says tas abli, or rather let someone be misabel, is by a fast Torah. Now maybe it's not clear if they died in the war or it's talking about whatever. Again, I'm saying a mitzvah. Right? Yeah, of course. We see Avram died and other people. And what do we see from this? He brings that. It's much brings. How could you say that there's no need to cry? Avram even cried when his wife died. She was 127. It wasn't even tragedy. It's either you believe that it's Shemayim, yes, well, the two things. But I want to say, no, this is a good proof. It's a very, very good analogy. So what's the pusik? It says, when you take the fast and you're making this mass, this gross b'devet, the kneged tzara, whatever it is, at least a shtickle mensch, right? That's the whole pusik. A shtickle mensch, right? There's a list of ways to be a shtickle mensch, right? One of them is, don't be such a chayro to tell her not to be misabel. It's amazing that you see this is like the minimum menschlichkeit, right? Because if I start, we're not giving her the maximum menschlichkeit, let's be real, right? Maximum menschlichkeit would be to send her back to V'yavim, right? And we can't say that it's tzara or however you for that thing. But the minimum menschlichkeit is give her space to cry. Minimum menschlichkeit. I feel like if I start him to them, I feel he's still a goy, when the guy is or whatever, it's a goy, that's the minimum. So if you say that it's a frimkeit, not to be misabel, you're not being over the head. It's the minimum menschlichkeit. And actually, and you see, I saw and now the Rambam, and interestingly, this is interesting for me, because the Rambam in Tamei HaMitzvahs skipped a while. I just got a new thing, and they in the back have this tzaddik made a chart for Tamei HaMitzvahs because these groups are different, right? And they made a nice chart on the end. And you can see the Hilchos Oval is empty. I think it's the only empty group of I think it's I'm checking. The Kiddush, no, there's two more empty group of halachas. Kiddush HaChodesh doesn't have. Shkulim and Kiddush HaChodesh don't have. And that's all. And Availus. There's three, in Ramam divided everything into groups. There's three groups in the whole Torah that don't have a time. So Shkulim and Kiddush HaChodesh are not really shver because they're technical, obvious things I don't think really needs to be mentioned. But this one is actually more shver. Maybe I missed one. I think it's one of them. They talk about it, but they actually didn't say anything about it. They said Shkulim and Kiddush HaChodesh. But Hilchos Oval, by the way, it's Pastamos I already talked. It's in a very weird place, Hilchos Oval. It's in Sefer Shleiftim for some reason. And because it's somehow Agav, the Dinah Ma'achiva Bezdin, somehow, I don't know why it belongs there. It's a very weird place to put it. I would put it in Sefer, where's it in Chashachnur in Yerdai? Also a weird place. I don't know why. Gets it. Say that, but everyone is Shabbos. Schwer. Not so schwer. I see, the Zmanim, there's a few that are missing, but I don't think it's really kashas. Kiddush HaChodesh. Say that, but we need to have Kiddush HaChodesh. I don't think that's... they have more? Okay, but kids, one of them is Hilchos Availus. But Lamasa, the Rambam does talk about Availus. Shleibim Koimah. And if I would make this chart, maybe I would add like a comment. They made 2:14, so you could figure out like... and the Rambam does mention Availus, and it's taken by the fast, which is over here. Well, I wrote down where it is, but now I don't see from where I wrote it down. Yeah, Gimel Mem Aleph. The fast, and he says this. Zel Shaina. Where is this? I wrote down the parak. What's a long parak? Here, it's the end of the parak. And the Sefer is called Din Diafastoya, and he explains that he says this: it connected. It's harder. Even though you're doing this, you have to do menschlich. Wow, that's the language that they decided to translate the Ramam with. פעם שנייה עד שישקט אבלה ואיך להצטער, ואין למנוע ממנו להסאבל, ודיאס מזנחס ולבקוס, כמו שנאמר אבקסס הראיה. And he says, why? כי הווילה מויצה מרגויה בוויכיים, ובאירם את אבלם, עד שיחלש כחסיים הגפני מליספל אויסים מאויר נפשי, כמו שהשמח מויצה מרגויה במיני המשחק. לפי כחוס להתאיר ונס לרשש לכך עד שתילם רבחי ואבה. So he has like a psychological theory. I don't know exactly what it means. I'm sure that if we'll look in, like, this probably comes from somewhere. We have to look in maybe they know a source for this ideas that he has here. So he's saying, when a person is happy, he has to give out his happiness somehow. Otherwise, I don't know exactly what the theory is. I don't want to put in like psychology, That's probably not what he meant. You feel like you might say you find menicha, like, and he claims that the way it works is somehow that you become tired of crying. So that's like you get. I don't know the handic way to say it. The guy gave him the gun crying, so now he could calm down somehow. He like literally becomes tired. And he says it's the same thing for simcha. This also. So
it has to be expressed. He's saying it has to be expressed.
That's how modern psychologists would say. I don't know if the Rambam. This is one of the things that I don't know if the Rambam thinks of psychology in this way. Yes, modern people would say something like that. But he says that it helps also. In other words, it helps you be misnachem. Crying, and you cry until you.
If you express it,
then you finish with it, something like that. And you got. He says that you literally koichasai gifniim, right? He says that your body becomes tired and somehow it. Because you don't have koich to be sad anymore, so you're happy. I don't know exactly how it's supposed to work. I think that it's an interesting question to find out what exactly he means. Like, what is his psychology theory here? And he tells you the same thing, simcha. In other words, teim l'choyre simchas nesin or simchas yamtiv in some sense is about this also, right? Of course, he doesn't say that in the parak about simchas yamtiv either. But he soivel means faket. It means that faket. He should not be soivel it.
No, by simcha, it's like
yeah, I don't know exactly. Saying the same thing. If you're too happy and you're not going to know what to do, so again, I don't know. I don't know what the theory is, but this is the place that they found that I'm talking about actual availis, not trying to make it into something else. And then again, this is only legabe the benudin lechavari, the Indian that you should be not mentioned to the fast but I don't think. Obviously, he thinks like this about reality also. I mean, he says that it's a teva, and obviously mitzvah availus is probably about this. Maybe that's why he didn't put it availus. Maybe he just thought that it's enough what he wrote here. I don't know. He says even something even worse. They shouldn't be misvakech with her about it as amina in that time. You saw? That's also very sharp for Ram. It's the only place that he says something like that. It says b'meshech. The next shtickle it says the whole 30 days you let her din of a dezura. It's also a certain menschlichkeit that you would not expect from people, would not expect from the Rambam.
Well, you don't expect from the Torah, even if it's whatever.
Nachamo, in the end we're going to force her to not stop doing the Zura.
Yeah, it's like a certain like.
But her mother died. What do you want from her? Nebuch, you chapped her. Was willst du von der Leben oben?
That's the first part. The second part.
That's the second thing.
And the second thing, you took it from like you used to. You can't also expect it to change in a minute. Give it like time.
Yeah. We're talking giving her time. Mekan yesh nekor la sach sachen. Okay, but kitzer. So this is the only place that I found that I was saying this, but Lamasa he does say it in personally we know, right? So I think that this is so that if you want to go to Hilchas Availes, right? If you go to Hilchas Oval, no. It says something similar, right? If you see, actually it goes the other way, right? Very interesting. So we have to figure this out. I will try to figure out a different time. Let me start first with the first thing. I will show you another place where the Rambam shows that. No, because I'll tell you why. Because the Rambam L'chora is very against Mis'al Yosef Medai. That's the context. Yeah, sure. I saw someone here quote a Ramban that says the same thing. If I could find it.
Oh, it comes up from like a thing.
Could be from
under my name. I didn't even know that number's under my name.
It's not. It's just it's fake. This is what people write. I mean, it was a bit geafend, though. Oy vey, me kann nicht treffen gehen, ich mal jetzt land. Ah. Over here is given Ayid, das hat gekot Ramban. I'm not finding it now. Here. The Ramban by mitzvahs leisas godly says that it has to do with the same shekel. Like there's mitzad echat leisas godly is lachayre about
oh, this right. This is
the Ramban.
Right.
So the Ramban is saying lachayre. In other words, lachayre leisas godly lemes is saying you should not be sad when someone died.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, hello. What's the close number? What's the close cell number? Right.
But that's more theoretical. That's more philosophical. Over here, the Ramban is saying that the mitzvah is to not care about someone dying or to care less. In other words, and this he matches to the idea in Chazal that you shouldn't be miskasha yosim medai. We have to look up at Chazal what Chazal mean by that. I know what the Rambam means. I don't know what Chazal means. And then he says mitzad shani lechoyre lefiza hayroi lesa kili in ganzen, even the crying says no, because the teva is the cry. So that's normal. In other words, the Ramban, the fact, I'm just trying to make this the point. So the Ramban, the fact that there's a teva to cry when someone he says actually something interesting here, which doesn't match with what he says in the other place. But the teva is an argument to him. A person is sad when someone goes away, when someone dies, he's sad. So if he's gonna be sad, he'll be sad. It's not how do you call it? Uncle the Torah is not gonna ruin that. It's not gonna go against that. That's basically his what it says here. Exactly like I thought he's saying. He's saying that since the
for different reasons, sort of
it's not like this guy it would be too much. The master it's still a question of commerce in a certain sense, right? This guy would be too much. And this is
it's not because the person is the loss of the person.
It's not lost because the neshama is going to chvais, so it's not going to die. So if you would be less guy, they would be killed. It's lost. I cry, yeah. Fuck it. If someone goes away without dying, you also cry. So crying doesn't nevata that it's lost. That's what he says here. Yeah. Right. That's interesting because maybe that does stem with the beginning with the Akdam of Torah Sodom, right? The Akdam of Torah Sodom says that. Basically, he argues with the philosophers that said that this is what it says. First he says and so on. He makes it mostly into tshiva, and he claims. What? He's mostly arguing with the philosophers that say that there's nothing wrong with dying because it's normal, and anyway, the main thing of the person is a cycle. He says Socrates, right? And he's not masking with this because he thinks it's be'oinish, because he basically thinks that people were supposed to live forever. This is a big difference with the Ramban's shit about and Kolshkin, if he dies that it's be'oinish and so on, so it should remind you of God's chava and so on. So let me not umkommen today nekide. Okay, I have to read this movie in but it's not so what he says in the other place. But it's also not what I wanted to show about the part about being natural. It's the only thing that he uses the nature is to show that it's crying doesn't mean us. Which one? Where is it? Oh, he does say that? No, he's talking about no, that's that, but he's not saying that it's just because you're sad. That's not what it says here. Okay?
It's not have all these in English you're going to say loved ones, person's loved ones. It's a
yeah. No, so let's okay. Let me do there's another place where it says it even more clearly, I think, about Chisamas. Okay, nice. So was ich will zurückgehen do is to the Rambam. Okay, so that's the Rambam's thing. Now, the Rambam says something like this, okay? He makes all the Hagbilas. Ein Beichen alames, Yos, mi shleishim yaim, and so on. This is all based on Chazal, right? I think so. Yeah. Yeah, Ein Beichen alis kashen alames, it says, Mesaf Me'etkot, and so on. This, by the way, remember I gave a whole sheet on this language. This is the case of the Maggid Mishnah's language, but here it says something similar. But this means, this is the Bas Yosef saying it. The Rambam doesn't have a source, he just made it up, but it makes sense. Anyways, but there's Zoktazoi. Minish Baich Yoisim is it, and then makes some Talucha clearly. Ali is Kashal on Mesa Yismedai, Shneim Matif Kelemes, Kloime Yoisimedai. Of course, this, in other words, there's a certain amount. Let me understand the Ramam, because I think it's this is at least his definition of. There's a certain amount which is not Yosef and Dai, and he just gave the definition: 3 days for a normal person, more for a Talmud Chacham, and so on. At most 30 days, right? Maybe 12 months Maspidim, and so on. Me'ef and Dem is what's wrong with Me'ef and Dem. It's very important to realize what's wrong with Me'ef and Dem. What would Chazal say? Why is it wrong Me'ef and Dem? I could say things like the Ramban says, right? Number one, the Ramban seems to say that more than that, or let's say Goidi, which would be more than that, would mean that you're clearly saying that everything is gone, right? And that's not true. So it's like a shtickle kfira, like you're not masking to shuras hanefesh, something like that, right? That's a pshat. Another pshat we could say, another pshat you could say is that maybe it's like it would be like tarimas, aldinish like this. You're allowed to cry, but not too much. God is right. So something like that. These are two theories that I could think of for the Gemara without the Rambam pshat. Now come the Rambam and says something like that. Says lama, and he says why? You realize that he did something really radical. This is if the people that think that the Rambam literally says the opposite of this in Hilchas Tanis must be wrong, right? Because here the Rambam says that it's normal for people to die, and if you're going to be, the Gemara seems to think that it's because of the Boichal Mesach, that it's going to be Moed Dinim, like it's. That's like being smarter than God. We could patch the Rambam into this, but it's not. The pshat is like I said. The second pshat, like I said, is the pshat Gemara. Right now, the Rambam. Wait. I agree. But let's first be very clear about this. The Rambam says the fact that someone dies is normal, and then again, noch in 20. If you cry about it, a little bit you're allowed to cry because you're sad. That's the ted. It says they were giving an allowance, or not allowance. It's a mensch, you have to cry. And forget, if he doesn't cry at all, he says in Zachzuri. We have to get to the next part. But at the limit of whichever is the shir, not it's avayr, not it's misran. It's a tippish. What do you want? That's the world. What was your plan when you planned the guys to live forever? There was no such plan ever. According to the Rambam, there was literally never such a plan. Even after Tchias HaMayis, we're not going to live forever. Remember? So there's such a thing. There's no plan, so you're just dumb. You'll do this. There's a balance. That's the Rambam's whole thing of the Torah is to be balanced. There's a balance where you cry a little and then you stop and you remind yourself that it's derech menugesh l'olam and it's normal, and I get in tug. Okay, so this is mamish. Then of course now if you sing like this, then again even in the menugesh l'olam there's a shir that you should be misabel. So that's not a stira b'chlal. You could say that even let's just try to calculate like this. If let's assume that all tragedies are really menugesh l'olam, maybe like the Rambam says in Chelek Gimel about Ashgacha, that really nature doesn't care about if you're a tzaddik or erusha, and therefore random tragedies happen all the time, and there's no reason for that. That's literally what the Rambam, at least that's what he says Aristotle holds. We don't know if he holds like that. He doesn't exactly hold like that, and that would not be a steer with being misabel. Because obviously a person is a person. The fact that you're a philosopher and you know that it's random doesn't make you less sad. Right? So Bissl is duashi. Right? So that's number one, the natural thing. Number two, the Rambam says this also in Pirkei HaShkucha. It seems to be very important, and we have to really figure out how. That it would be wrong to ignore things in a the Rambam's big thing is that we could have the Aristotle's theory of the world of Mikra, but we also have to have Bechira. That's his big thing, really. In other words, we have to have Tshiva. And Tshiva in the Rambam means Bechira. It's almost the same thing. It's another whole shir. But basically means that there needs to be something for a person to do. If you say that the Rambam is basically, just as much as he might not believe in Ashkecha Prutis in a certain way, he definitely doesn't believe in fatalism. He doesn't believe that would be a right thing to say, at least. Right? It doesn't, it's faket, it's even mischayev zemetach in a certain sense, right? Because if everything is determined, then there's nothing you can do. In other words, the shit of Ashkol Ba'ashkocha is also to the Rambam Mikra. It's functionally the same thing. Very important to realize. But to the Rambam, to say that everything is the same, God does everything, I don't understand it, it doesn't make sense to us, that's literally Mtelchim Keri. It's Keri with God, like we keep on saying that the shit is, right? Shit is Harutzna, shit is Apekoris, is more or less the same thing, plus or minus God. Which is not a small plus or minus, but it still means that we can't do anything about it. And to the Rambam, the Yisod Torah, and he says the Yisod Torah is Bechira. I know that he didn't count it in, but one of the Yisod Torah is that you person can do, and he reads this into the Yisod of Schar V'Onish itself. Schar V'Onish means Bechira, really, to the Rambam. In other words, it's more the Bechira is more central than the Schar V'Onish, which is the Tetzuah. In other words, your Bechira is real; it has real effects on the world. In other words, when you see something happen, you have to think of how to make it not happen or what you have to do for this. That's how the Rambam sees it. And therefore the Rambam says something, and he says it here, and he says it more in the Chastan, so we have to show the difference. I want to be very clear. And he says, Mish einem es that I'm pretty sure that this Achzuris has nothing to do with Shiva. This is plain, because it's kein Mensch. Okay? Elo, but then Elo is not Elo lo ye Achzer. Elo yefachet v'yidag yefash v'masa v'yachzer bet Shiva. Okay? So what does it mean yefachet v'yidag? What should be afraid of? Then he goes this Echem Nechabira and this whole Medrash and so on. This is the Rambam's language of, remember, from Rosh Hashanah, right? Well, Shiva also, right? Yer Mishnasa. Yer Mishnasa basically is a very general term that means to the Rambam. Yeah, yeah. It's the Rambam's way of saying realize the truth, right? It's we call it Aris, wake up. I don't remember where he got the language. Yeah, I think that what's going on here is two things. Number one, you remind yourself that people actually die. That's like what we saw from Tevel Lechel Best Love and the Ramban also. Right? In other words, of course it's Menogish Lem to die, but you don't know that. You're sleeping. Well, sleeping is not, like I'm saying, I said before, not that you're normal and you have to like be misgabe. You're just shashluf and you forgot the basic reality, basic things that everyone should know, you forgot. So wake up, people die. So if you're going to ignore that, you're not going to be a bigger fema that knows that everyone dies. It's even actually worse. You think you're going to live forever. No, this guy died and you're also going to die. So therefore the tshiva. Very simple. And secondly, it seems like, and this is the second thing is, I think is very merimiz here. I'm not sure if it's actually what it says. I'm not sure how the Rambam understands it. Or not sure how we should understand it. Because I think that it's very important to realize that Tilchas Tanis is no shaykh to what most people are using it to. We have to, in other words, talk the context. Because Hilchas Tanis is the Hilchas Tanis. We have to keep on remembering that. Hilchas Tanis doesn't say whenever something happens in the world you should do tshiva. It doesn't say such a thing. It says that if you're in the tzura, then you do tshiva until the tzura goes away. And when it goes away, what do? You stop fasting, right? Well, hopefully you don't go back to doing the hafaydis, but the tshiva is a very real. It's supposed to help you. And how do we do it? We fast with Mass, we find out what the tzura could be for, and we try to fix it. And the Rambam does say over there that if not, it could be more tzuras, but it's still talking about it like a hemshech. It's hilchas tanis. It's not hilchas stam. It's not hilchas no shaykh to tragedies. Tragedies have to do hilchas availis more. Because availis is talking about something that already happened. So now, okay, there's a certain sense in which it could continue to happen. First, there's a sense in which it will continue to happen because you will die. And then there's Yedek Kol Chabir, which says, well, you could make it a natural pshat. Maybe there's a Magaif and you're going to catch his thing. If you want, like even supernatural, there's a din or whatever. Same idea, right? So in some sense, it's still an ongoing thing. So, but most of Avalis is not really about that. And Nuchstanis, it's mostly about actually getting out of the tzura that you're in now. So anyone that calls the Ram Nuchs Avalis after something happened, that there's nothing, they're not planning to do anything, and there's nothing, it's not an ongoing thing. It's not a shakran. It's not an ivritat. No shaykhs. And forget that Rambam. Again, you have to realize that Rambam. It's also.
I was looking. This is the only Rambam that you can think of that has to do with afterwards. Is it available?
Well, that's what Avalis is. Avalis is afterwards, no. No, there's more Rambams. The Techimekeri is the Techimekeri is the more general thing. He says it on the Chambas Mikdash, says in all these things, but all of them he sees in a sense. Yeah, it says, and Nagera says something. And he says that I have a list. I'll send you. Like there's 6 or 7 times where he quotes Chaz's this pshat, his pshat in the Pusik and the Techimekeri, and there's more things that we could talk about it, but. I think that in halacha, in Sefer Yad, I don't remember that there's more things, but I don't think it's a problem. Hilchos Tanis is talking about, and you've noticed what he's doing in Hilchos Tanis. So Hilchos Tanis, and I told this to some people, Hilchos Tanis is not Hilchos Amina. He's doing the opposite. The Rambam is not saying you should believe. That's not what his problem is with the Keri. His problem is that you're not doing anything. The Rambam is literally chazering a drusha from the Mishnah. He's saying it in his way. Right? The Mishnah says, right? In other words, the reason why we have Tanis, and the Rambam is doing something a stickle moitz midai pshita. Because the reason we have Tanis is why? Tefillah. No, Vipshat is tefillah. Mesechtes Tanis is a certain kind of tefillah. Tefillah b'shas tzura, right? But there's a tzura, there's no rain. That's where it starts with. So you're gonna daven and ask Hashem for rain, right?
That's why you have to fast.
Fast. The Tanis is a din tefillah. Pashtus. Like Yom Kippur. Like what do you mean? David HaMelech fasted. Fasting is a kind of tefillah. I'll have to go make another whole sheet. What fasting is for? Fasting is a way of davening. How exactly it works? One of the dinim of tefillah is that I think it has to do with like Levisha's sak. It's about making yourself poor before God and so on. It's not about being machnezach. It's a way to be ma'ored rachmim. God has rachmanis on people that look nebuchdik. The din. So if you make yourself look nebuchdik, then God has rachmanis on you. It makes it so. It's a way of getting his attention. It's like it's similar to a protest. You go with not mamish a protest, but it's a way of being ma'ored rachmim. That's what Tana says with Pashtas. And also all the kind of dinim around that, like that. But I can put him. Yeah, I don't know exactly. It's making it sound like a din. I'm saying but the point is the Tanis. If you ask anyone why do we fast when there's a surah, they won't say to do tshiva. They would say to be mispalel. That's the pshat. What do we do by a Tanis most of the time? We're mispalel. Comes the Rambam and he turns it over. And again, it's I'm not saying that it's b'limikar. It's based on the Mishnah. But Mamish tries it and he says that Tanis is so you should do something. What should you do? You should do tshiva. Now doing tshiva, and the Rambam generally includes that things will be get better with derech hateva, because that's Bechlala's theory of how tshiva works. He barely believes in chavonish, miraculous chavonish. He believes that mostly it's with derech hateva, but not getting into that. But basically, the most. Yeah, there's ways. I'm going to it always helps. Whatever. The Rambam has, it's a more complicated. There's ways to fan for the kasha. That's not a real kasha. It doesn't matter because the Rambam. Maybe it doesn't matter. Beside this, I'm not getting into that. The point is that you have to do something that will actually cause. It's not you have to believe that it's not that's not mikra, not teva and God. That's not what he's interested in. He's interested in you're saying that you have to do something. It's not any hilchos. It's hilchos shiva. In other words, hilchos doing something. And what do you do? That's another question. But it's not hilchos. For all these drishas that say we should not believe, and if you believe you're achzeh, it's just the opposite. And all these people, in the end of the day, what they're doing is they don't have to do anything. In reality, what is it about? It's about not having to do anything. Nobody actually plans that they're going to do tshiva and things like that will stop happening. And nobody really believes that. That's another way of saying what I said in the beginning, that you're used to saying things that are slogans. Nobody believes that. We did this 30... Yeah. You're how old are you? Remember how many times we did this? We played this game. We played this film. You tell me what are you talking about? For how long? Nobody takes it seriously. Nobody actually plans that. You know what? Now we're gonna do tshiva. We're gonna change some. Nobody actually plans to make any real changes. No, not because Nachamol. This is not a vada. Mile, if you're talking about the personal tshiva, I think people actually do change. Okay, nicht auf einmal, so bisschen. At least you have some halach. If not, then it's taka pirim. I think that actually most people that care about tshiva are not making pirim. They're trying. That's normal. That's life. But okay, they have to get to a second thing about a public thing, that how you can't blame private tavaris on public for public anshin. But that's another whole thing. But nobody's actually planning to do anything. Imagine. In my imagination, if your real plan was to do something, you would okay, let's find an avayrach. Okay, you'll do something real. Nobody's even thinking of doing something real. Okay, the Rambam is about doing something real that will change the fact. It's going to turn the thing around. Maybe it's very hard, but that's what it's about. It's basically about taking responsibility, not taking responsibility in the sense of unresponsible, in the sense of that you have what to do. You have to do tshiva. And he literally turned over both availis both tshiva. And the Rambam turned over a lot of halachas. He transformed, even tshiva itself, he transformed into taking responsibility and not into asking forgiveness. If you learn tshiva and you see the Rambam struggling with doing this, and also in Murray you see him saying it explicitly. That's why I had a bunch of tshiva ones. The Rambam very much turns tshiva from what it used to mean, or at least in Kapura and so on, mostly about saying vidi and about getting God to forgive you, and he turns it into making you better. Very big chilek. The whole Shiva are based on the Rambam doing this mapaicha, and he's mamish the whole Rambam, the very famous Rambam in the beginning of Perek Bay is Ikra Tshiva Lazav Zachet. He made it up by himself. It's not what it says in Masechet Siyama. It doesn't say anything like that. Ikra Tshiva in Gemara doesn't seem to that. Other Rishonim don't think like this. And he, I'm not saying it doesn't have a makar, but he decided this is Ikra Tshiva. Everything else is Klik Kapur are not really important. He quotes them, but he doesn't really believe in them basically. But it's beferish that he doesn't really believe in it, and maybe there's such a thing. I'm not saying, but it's not the ikke, and that's a very big change that he makes, and he makes the same change in L'chastanis, and this whole Keri thing business about that. Okay, where do I flew away from other things? So that's the then a kid about So there's three different things. Like it's in Avilis, there's three different things. Turns out to be there's natural thing that you have to be sad. Then there is what was the second thing? The second point is that's how I call that the first thing, right? So really, the second thing is that if aviful this merugash loylam, it doesn't really make sense. It's dumb to be sad. That's an important thing to notice. And there's a steer between that dumbness and the feeling, and you should have both. I think that's no way out of that steer. It doesn't say beferish here, but I think that I'll show you. I want to show you his letter. You see that going on in his real life. There's a steer. No, there's two. There's a faket letter also. There's actually a steer in not in Kisvei Ramam, and also in Chaya Ramam. Because so I'll show you a letter from the first side. Now you see a letter for the second side. There's a very famous letter about his brother dying, and it says literally like this. This is what it says. Wie is this? Yid Aleph. You get a Yid Aleph in this version. It says like this. And by the way, it's a whole personal letter. He's brogus on someone that didn't write him letters. You remember? Very nicht idealistic. So again, Aid Reb Adain, Rabbi Efes Adain was the Rambam's friend. I don't know what. And they lived together in Eretz Yisrael, and looked like he stayed in Eretz Yisrael or something. And the Rambam had to go to Mitzrayim. And Kitzer, and that guy wrote him a letter asking him for Tova. And in that Tova it said, why didn't I write you a letter to say hello? And this nowadays, my father died, and I got letters from all over, and you didn't even write me and Bechlala had so many tzudas. And Mamish, and this is where he says, and he's just complaining to his friend basically. And I had so many tzudas, and my father died, and even the worst thing that ever happened in my life, my brother died. You see, his father died, that's normal, fathers die. But his brother died, that he wasn't expecting. You see this difference, very clear. Because if you would tell some guy from this, like a minute pshita, the father died because he didn't have a your brother died because he didn't have a why would he be? It's very simple, this, right? His father died, his take was very sad, and he survived that. Then his brother died, and with a lot of money, right? A big part of the problem. And he left his little daughter and his wife, and they were living by the Rambam. And this is the illusion. So for a full year, he said he was literally like depressed. Basically, that's modern would be called depression, and he barely did anything. Okay, maybe he's got magazine. And this is 8 years later. So apparently this guy didn't talk to him for 10 years. This is a long fight. And then he says he's moichel him, whatever. But 8 years later, and he was abavlois nachamti. And he was my son. I was the younger brother, and he was my brother, and he was my student, and he was my business. And I learned diktik. I don't know what's the diktik got to do with anything. The only happy times I had when I was with him. Every time, I see, or even if just a book of his, I again become sad. Ad kan, this is 8 years later, okay? Lo yisab li yis medai, halachas, what's my team? Halachas, halacha, and the fact is a fact. And it finishes very naive. Lila Torah shashia v'divra chachmas eshkech ben yagoni azavati ba'ani. By the way, you notice that the Rambam never says Torah without adding the word chachmas. And this is also his personal item. It says, when nish v'nechlena b'isl, and I learn a little Torah and v'chlal chachmas, that's when I'm feeling better. But otherwise, his mamish plans to die in his depression. I don't know if he got ever better from this. Maybe a few years later was Charuik. But then beketze im kol zeh, ich bin because I know that you probably have such gemeint. Then lamaase, min adin, I should have even answered you because you forgot about me. You just asked me when you need to. But lamaase, I'm still your friend. And beketze, here I'm helping you. And if you would be here, I would give you even more money. And so he was moichelim. He said, that's what it says. I still love you. Okay. That's the Rambam, the Heilige Rambam's letter to his friend. But what do we learn from this? We learned in the first Nikida, the Ninaini, that this is a tragedy. It's nicht monogish l'olam l'master, right? Monogish l'olam is not, you went on a ship in a sea. Ich meine, kann blitz gefallen. I don't know if this chilik is enough. In other words, I'm sure if you would ask the Rambam, he would tell you this is also monogish. If you ask the Rambam about Nevochim, he would tell you, yeah, this is to be expected. Sometimes tzaddikim die in random events. But it's his brother. No, this is a chizuri. This is I think this mostly. Also. Yeah, also. It's less monogish l'olam. It's also monogish l'olam, but it's a different kind of monogish l'olam. It's less expected monogish l'olam.
Yeah,
it's monogish l'olam. It's two meanings of monogish l'olam. Right? There's monogish l'olam in the sense that everyone dies. That the Rambam literally thinks it's crazy to. The Rambam does agree. The Rambam thinks that we should not die, but the Rambam thinks it's crazy to expect not people to die. But secondly, there's also monogish l'olam in the sense of olam k'monogish. It's a different kind of sense.
Okay, it's a different thing.
Right. No, but of course, lachamol. If you would ask a halacha yid, Heim yesh chilik be alias kasha al ma'aseh bain died be if your brother who was your ach and all this whole arichas hesped that he just gave, is there enough k'minah? It's kind of k'minah la'alocha, right? The ma'aseh the halacha is quite a bit minach, but the reality is before that goes back to my thing. The first is the fact. Forget if you would not care. I'm not saying you should be depressed for a year. That's the first whatever, but. If it's not like that, then it would not be a mensch. And of course, then he says the Eitze is the basic letras chashia. You see, he had a solution for this problem most of, and in this time he wrote his Rambam or whatever, something. He didn't waste his life, but that's just the reality of it more than anything. You also see the Rambam not trying to be frim. I mean, he's frim in the sense that he's moichel, his friend, whatever, and he's not progis, but. This is why this is my one of this is more of my proof that besides not only all of them, they're never trying to be frim. They're like, you would like some rebbe would write such a letter ganz gartlich mit frimkeit. What is tells him what he thinks. That's how I know. No, this is my Raia, that when he says other things that he means them seriously. You understand? That's what I was all time talking about. Yeah, shemi yargi toicham yilmudi l'shaker. Understand? If you're yet used to saying things that you have that you just stam the welter on frimkeit, and then I don't know if you're ever saying the truth. I don't know if when you if I see someone that sometimes is mad, sometimes is brother, okay, now I could believe that when he said something else, then he was meaning it seriously. Now I have a very important Raia for the Rambam, and it's a little hard to figure out what exactly he's saying. A very important Raia for the Rambam that he does take seriously also the second sad of Menugash L'Olam. This is very, very controversial also because a lot of people read the Rambam in Pirkei Hashgacha. No, maybe that also. He says that also, and that's the third Rambam that I have to talk about. I forgot. A whole other thing. The Rambam in Pirkei Hashgacha says, right, says that basically there's no Hashgacha Prutis, only for tzaddikim, only b'derech devaikes, whatever, more or less. But the fact, if you're a tzaddik that you died in a ship, he literally uses this example, right? Then it's just random. And yes, there is a sense in which a tzaddik should have hashgacha, which not in a mikra, right? Nobody understands exactly how. He doesn't explain the mechanism, so we could leave that as a question mark. It's a black box for us. But if it didn't happen, it's a mikra. It's very important. It's not bedafka. It's not that God killed you. That's b'chla. By the way, this is another radical thing people don't realize with the Rambam using it. Why did the Rambam use the whole time this idea of talchim mikeri? He literally uses it a lot of times. It's because of this is very much connected with the Rambam's understanding that the world actually by default is mikra. only you need a yotzim and a klal. You need to be mafkia from that in order to have hashgacha.
Right.
And if you don't have hashgacha, then you're actually nusan lemikrim.
Yeah.
What I mean.
Yeah.
Therefore, when the Rambam says you shouldn't say talchim mikeri and so on, he's not really being accurate entirely to his theory. In other words, he's using this because this actually tries to bring you to his theory. In other words, it's not that people died in a car accident because God was mad at you. That's not. It's not true. Faked. The whole idea of the whole imtechli mikari is the Rambam. It's very. By the way, it's a very good mikar in the pusik if you read the way he reads for his whole way of looking at hashgacha. That there's really only schar and only onish. Is another way of saying it, right? There's only hashgacha micheles l'tzadikim that takes them out of the regular sedra olam in which they die, just like fish, just like fatas adam kid gayam, right? But udam should not be like gayam. But in other words, when he says that when there's a tragedy, he shouldn't say mikra kureloni, right? He's not saying it's not a mikra. To realize this, because of course it is.
Don't say mikra nikris,
right? But yes, but he's really saying it is a. But what does he really believe? Of course, he really believes that it is a mikra. Only if you would be a tzaddik, then you would not be nusin lemikrim.
Right.
So he's really saying, of course, mikras happened because you are not living with tzeichel, which is what being a tzaddik means. And therefore, and by the way, that's the reason why it helps for other tzuras also. If you understand, this is what's called you understand shaykhis. Now, when you ask me a kasha, why does it say the duvik of the godim, the duvik of ma'asam aruba, toisvat tzuras achayres? What's come down tzuras achayres? Why is he threatening me with other tzuras? This is the tanis we're being masana because there's no rain. The tanis is because keri is a general state. Either you're keri or not. There's no special this einish, that einish. So the second you're in keri, all the tzuras in the world are going to come on you. Are they going to fetish come on you? No, they're going to come on you. They will, exactly. You will be in the olam hamikra. But if you won't be, there's a way to get out of olam hamikra. How do you get out of olam hamikra? By being a tzaddik, by doing tshiva, basically.
Whenever mikra happens, you should be tzaddik to get yourself out of mikra.
Exactly. It's very different than what people think it means. And it's not bechinam, because otherwise, why keep on bringing this pusik of keri? Like, when this nasach psikim that said this charvanish, why does he want from this pusik keri exactly? People think that he's saying you shouldn't believe that it's a mikra, but he absolutely does believe that it's a mikra. It's trying to say that the world is by default a mikra.
Go with keri.
Exactly.
Exactly. I think also before he's saying that you shouldn't say Davin Hagar Shalom he doesn't say because it's not.
Right, I think, because it is. You to get your life out of Hagar Shalom.
It's achzoris to live in mikras.
No, I think the achzoris is not. I don't think. I think no. Yeah, I think achzoris is about my point number one. It's about natural empathy. If you say that if your brother dies or if your friend dies, again, how wide your empathy goes is actually how big of a person you are. But if your friend dies and you say, look, people die, they're a chayerur. I need the Ramam to tell you, need mikra to tell this. If it would be a mikra, you would not be a chayerur. I think that this language actually trains people to become chayerus. Yeah, if not for Ashgacha Prutas, then what do you mean? You would be chayerur? Let's say you're an atheist gumman. You know, they ask this it's a joke. They ask this atheist, what do you mean you say that nothing happens when people die? Imagine your friend is on his deathbed and his mom is verloren. What do you tell him? You say, yeah, of course I lie and I tell him that he's going to go to Gan Eden. So he's trying to say that. But I feel this is not the plain menschlichkeit. If you don't, he says it's a lie. But if you don't, not exactly the same thing. But that's what, of course, that's the Achzoris. And it says, then you're going to get a Muslim the Durk Masai Merum. I don't know which Masai Merum. It means that I'm not sure. I had a different chat. Who is the Masai?
No, you see, they weren't in Nick. You were in
It means, no, it means that you'll continue to do whatever you were doing until now.
Right, you do that and not be Nitzel.
Right.
Right, you're not going to be Nitzel.
Okay, so that's the...
The Klal Yisrael should be in a matter that these things don't happen.
Exactly. So people, personally, Klal Yisrael, however you say.
Cool, yeah.
But and if not, you will if you don't take this seriously, you will continue to be in that matter. That's another point, very important point about the Rambam's things. Now just exactly. I think that it's not a stir. I think that the same achzuri is the same achzuri. And menugash loyalem the al yomri. This al yomri, if it matches to something in the chaslevel, it matches to where he says. Ele yifachad, you understand? The yifashu remas of Yachze B'Tshiva. But there's a shir to this. In Elchzavel, there's a very beferish shir. If you do too much shiva, then you're also not doing it right. In other words, because you take some of that Menugash Loilem and you make it into, you're just a tippish.
What's the Lashon of the Ramam before? What's
this? This? Which one?
That was a Yigralem to take it off the
Yeah, v'zihi sheyigrem sheyis los ratzol lemelem. Medarke atshiva. Yeah.
So it doesn't mean, it means...
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and he's not being exact about this theory, of course not. Of course, I'm asking. Yes, of course. But that's the only way it could work, and the Beferish holds that that's the only way it could work. I don't think there's a way around this, really. There might be, but I think that the fact that he keeps on talking about this Delchi Mikeri is the Raya that he's thinking of that way of thinking of things. Like he brings Shishal B'goyim, remember, in the end, you need Ashgocha to keep you from the randomness of the world, chance of the world. Random is not right translation. Now I wanted to show you that the Rambam also actually, in his real life, actually practiced the opposite theory, which is not to care about Menogesh Lo'ilam, or not that you're typish.
You're right, it's Dachiyat it's not Amuna.
Yeah, of course. The Rambam, Dachiyat Shiva, by the way, is a precise term in the Rambam. If you look in Hilchos Shiva, you'll see that he divides Shiva and Dachiyat Shiva. It's very important. It's actually, Dachiyat Shiva means Taichatimtzas that bring you people to do Shiva. They're not real things. All the Dachiyat Shiva, because the Rambam that's the Rambam's whole pshat. The Rambam's whole pshat, yeah, of course. The Rambam's whole pshat in Hilchos Shiva is because he had this problem. Because most things that you find in Shiva and Chazal are not what the Rambam thinks of Shiva as changing your masim. They're fasting, about Shiva, all kinds of different things. Right? The Rambam had this one about Shiva, Shabul Yodai, whatever, Isha, and he used, so the Rambam decided to make this chilik. The real act, Ikarat Shiva, is stop sending. What are all these other things? They're medarke at Shiva. In other words, fasting and saying Tehillim and saying Slichas. These are ways to order you to do Shiva. That's the definition of Darkat Shiva and Hilchos Shiva. So that's, of course, this is another addition to that. Yeah. But we have to, in other words, there's two opposite things here, the mass. In other words, in one sense, there is the Nechumah, and to the Rambam, the Nechumah as well. There's one Nechumusi Bani of Limited Torah. It was the Nechumah, the man Nechumas Oval if you're Rambam. So, number one, Nechumusi Bani. Okay, that's if you're Mamash. Number two, that Menogesh Lo'ilam. After 30 days, what do you say to yourself? You remind yourself that everyone died, and that itself is the Nechumah, the master. They tell you Lech L'Beis Oval, in the sense that everyone dies, and you did Shiva because you remind yourself that everyone dies. That itself is the Nechumah. You're not mad or sad that someone dies. It was expected. Right? And of course, like I noted, the moment you have this Menogesh Lo'ilam exception, not exception, it's actually L'Chtchila, right? Because only a Tippish is mad. Only a Tippish is mad at the Menogesh Lo'ilam. Then you can actually understand that it's true also for actual tragedies in a certain sense. Of course, you could be sad that, like I said in Hilchos Shiva, you could have been a tzaddik that's not nussing the tragedies. Maybe. But as far as you can't, then there's no reason to be mad either. The Rambam literally says, in Tchela Gimel, where he talks about the problem of evil, right? Why bad things happen to good people. He more or less says that it says that they didn't happen to all people. They just happen to they don't happen to because you're bad. The Choymer has a whole theory over there. And then one of his teretzim is that most bad things happen because it's your own fault. So and then the rest of the things are just by definition because the world has some chance built into it. And there's only Ashgacha Klus, not Ashgacha Blitz. And the Rambam says it's a fetish. There's a letter to his friend, to his student Rabbi Yosef, who was the one that he wrote the Moira to. Okay, and it says like this, and it's a bad translation, so we don't know exactly what it says. But it says something like this: Kvar daticha sheniftara basa ktana. Okay.
The Rambam.
Yeah, and we don't know either the Rambam's daughter or that guy's daughter. One of them's daughter. So close, nishta. A little girl. Wait, it's very. I think it's important that it was a little girl. And it says like this: Hashem kodim kol yisum besussa kapura. Okay, that's right? It says, Bani loites abel loites atzav v'le'al zocha v'le'al nekayva. Hashem is alle yedei avoid. I don't know, yedei avoid, the God knows. I don't know. Ve'emes mashem. It's the translation here is not God is alle knows. Ve'emes mashem. Shetoiv minyan in yunamin odem atzal kol maskel. V'le'oim shetoiv michlet. Ele sheyoysen noisim atadage. I don't know exactly what this even all these words mean. The Chayre says, what is good if you're smart? You'll know. Or maybe this is not actual smartest thing to think, but it's the best thing you should think to not have dagas. The Chayre. The world is good, like the Rambam is Ma'arich and Moired. Toiv Moired is very interested in this. That the world is actually good and not mostly bad, like other people think. And then he says that maybe if you don't understand this, you'll get the Moed in the Voichim because he's sending it to him piecewise, you'll understand this better. But it basically literally says here, and I know this person tells Tid Perishim Esnais and Bruchas, but it's not what it says here. That's another point. It also says Moira, but on different context. Well, what he says here, since you know from Moira, and you will know, right, that there's only Ashgacha Klulis. So if you're smart, you're gonna just like God. In other words, it's like tzaddikim dem nakoina. It's like God doesn't care about little kids dying, because that's just chance. It's part of Nugish Ledim. I think that's important because at least in his die, right, the kids die. It's not like his brother died that it changed his life. Kids die, and God doesn't care. So why should you care? If you're a smart person, you care about the truth. You're worried. You're concerned with things that have actual validity to them, and to God's mind, validity is min. Or we could say in the min odom, it means the seichel, which is what defines a person as person. But I mean, and you shouldn't care about prat. It's not a thing that you should care about. It literally says this. I know that it's the most crazy nichem of Adam to ever write. And the Rambam himself, so this shillat on the bottom, he says that probably this is the second letter that he wrote. Probably in the first one he was talking a mensch, because this is nicht menschlich. And we have an eye from the other letter that the Rambam does all these should be menschlich, right? So say that let's again, we don't know the context. It's hard to know. Maybe it was a 3-week-old baby, and every third baby in his days died. It wasn't such a. It's hard to figure out. I'm assuming that that's the reality, something like that. But the fact is that he says that he literally uses his theodicy of Moira Nevaichem, and the radicalist thing that you could take from that, which is that God doesn't care. And if God doesn't care, why do you care? Basically, what it says.
It's not even so. It can't be such a bad thing.
Exactly, because the universe is actually good, and the good universe, part of it is that it doesn't care about these things. So why would you be mad? Now, the thing is, this person stellt ja Besechtes the Perishim Esnais and Besechtes Bruchas, right? Now, over here it says like this.
He says I. He doesn't say it's the same thing, but okay.
What? Maybe he is right. No, he's saying because this daughter died. He said if your son die, which is worse, you shouldn't either be sad. Okay, look what it says here. So that's what it says here. But that's what it says. Now, so that's another. I put that in Moira. I put it into the yad. I put it into the thing of Menugash Loilam. This is just a better explanation of why the Menugash Loilam is like this. Menugash Loilam is Menugash Loilam. What's that's right. This is a more radical, and therefore the world is still good. That's what he's worried about in Tchela Gimel. That if you would say that there's more Ra in the world than Toiv, then you're saying that the world is bad. And that's the loika pusik, or he really thinks that's the loika truth, but he brings the pusik also. Right, now there's another thing which is the Rambam over here. And this is here he says another thing. So how many things do we already have? We have that you should be sad, we have that you should do tshiva. We have that there's menugash l'olam, and therefore you should be less sad. And we have what it says here, that God doesn't care about prutim, so you shouldn't either.
No, you also the other Ramam that went with his brother that he should be sometimes.
Yeah, that's I put that into Tev. And we could also add the Zois Nechamosi Bani, which maybe the reason that has a way of understanding also. Now the Mishnah in Bruchas that Chazai Kashem Bruch Latoi right? Remember the Mishnah. This is a Raia, right? Mishnah is nice. No, Mishnah is another thing. I think this is actually the Kabach translation. Now, it says like this. I think that's what they have here. Yeah, this is not in the Rashon Flag, nicht so schreiben. But this is best if he. So the Rambam looked at what's the exchange with the This is the Gemara like Lina Besimcha, right? Let's let me say calm Besimcha. Wie ich beshik shaisa. Wie yashav datek. Atshire. You should look like the time you make Marach Taiva match. And how could it be? Look the Rambam say. Of course, this is the loik. I think that he's trying to minimize it actually. You should be happy. You should not be so. That's lime. So I don't know. The language of the Gemara is the Kablini Besimcha. That's a thing that you said in the end, and the MS that I was struggling with. Now, in the Rambam's Pshat, this is the Rambam's Pshat. We have to understand very well the Rambam's Pshat because people have a lot of confusions about it also. Now he says, "Kamad over the Shema Tav." Okay, and he says, now the Rambam says, even if it wouldn't be in the Torah, it still would be true. I think maybe even the Torah is a bit says the faket of this because the Torah does have a virus. And he says why? Because a lot of things seem to be bad and they're good. A lot of things seem to be good and really they're bad. So therefore, this first is like a very practical thing.
What's he going to say to his brother?
Ich weiß nicht. It says therefore, you don't know the tachlis, so it's vanished the spell. Very calm. Same thing. Same thing, by the way, you see? By the way, this is an important piece because he's very consistent. Don't be too sad when something seemingly bad happens because maybe it's really actually good. And don't be too happy when something good happens because maybe it's actually bad. Right? You have to remember, all the people that are busy with these Ashgacha Prutis. That your son getting married is the worst thing, you know. You have to be consistent. The Rambam is, yeah, exactly. You should be mashlet the das because you have to know. And that's it. Yeah. So, and Lamasta, this is only one. I think this is only half of what he thinks. Then he says, no, he says, therefore, this is just him like keeping track of what it says more times, what it says less times. Simcha says in the Gemara and Berachas once or whatever, they shouldn't be happy only when you're Isaac and mitzvahs. Right, that's the Gemara and Berachas. And therefore, why is it? But faket, he say more times, right? Not to be sad, says even in Chachomim, we do see this chilik that they're not so consistent. And then he explains why. Lamasi explains the end. In the end, he seems to explain what it really means, right? First, it looks like he's saying, sometimes your business gelung, then that caused a bigger problem to happen, like both ba'olam hazeh, right? Like all the Ashgacha Pruta stories, right? Now he says something really, really what he really wants to say, I think. This is a real problem. Yeah, ולכן יקון אדם מחשבתי ויבקש מאל שכל מה שיקרה בעולם הזה תבויסה וראיסה וסיבה להשגת האיש האמיתי. And that's what it means ביצר טוב ויצר רע, שיסם בלי באהבה סאל ואמינו בה אפילו בייס המרי, שכל זה יצר רע, and so on. In other words, what he's saying here is really what he says about Eve in Chelek Gimel, which is that at least one of them, some Farshim understand this to be the main teretz to Eve's question. But the Rambam says it openly only when he talks about, actually explains Parshas Eve. And he says, if I could find the Parshas Eve on the floor, he says that the he says it on even trying to remember where he says it beferish, but the thing that he says is that since a smart person doesn't care about anything of Olam Hazeh, he only cares about it. This says like this. This is the Avli Omar. He says like this. He puts it into the what Eliphaz said. Aval. He says that the real all these questions, and that's it says in Eliphaz, all these questions that Eve had, they're only shver for people that don't actually know God. In other words, they know Matzad Mesorah, not Matzad Lo Yodes La. Avli Omar. It says like this: Omar Masha Omar Kolzman Eve Kolzman Shlois LeDiev Lo Yodes LeAel Al Pi Al Mesorah. Mash Yod Moisei Hamayim Bnei Torah. Aval Kash Yodes El B'Diev Adois Hoida Sha'Ishra Amiti She'Akrus Eliyah Niftach LeKol Mi Shemakar Oisei. ושם פגם מן הפגועים האלה כילם ליחל לאדם האישר הזה כל זמן שידע סעל מתוך מסוירס לא בדרך עיין דימה שאייב כל זמן שידע סעל מתוך מסוירס לא בדרך עיין דימה אייב שמיני האישר המדימים האלה גם בריאס אישר וילודם הם התכלס ולכן נובך ובכס אילון דברים האלה נצא זה צנלם מפרש הפוסק זה משמעות של דבור ולשם האיזן שמעתיך I've heard of you in other words I've been ואתו אין רעסך now I see you על כן אמאס וניחמתי הלופה ואיפה לפי העניין Al can emas And he says that this is the true thing that Eve said. That's why it says, my whole kasha was, I had a kasha, I heard about God, and I thought that God has to give me good things. And I also didn't actually have Tanag and Asugas God, because I only heard about him. So therefore I had a kasha. But now that I actually understand God, this is Tanag B'tiach. This is actually the only real Chava in the world, according to this pshat. Because anyone that knows God, and he quotes Pega, and he's referencing Shir Shal Pugoyim. Shir Shal Pugoyim is saying that when you know God, you won't care about everything else. So there's two ways of reading Shir Shal Pugoyim. One is the way L'choyre says, and usually where it says, if you'll have Dvaikas, then nothing will actually happen to you. And some Mefarshim actually think from this shtickle, in Paragraph Gimel, Chal Gimel, that it really means to say that you won't care about anything happening to you. Because this is actually deterministic. This is actually, there's no way to take this away from you. He says that there's no pega that could take away the oisher of Yidisa. And since this is, then you're really like, you're really happy. So if you're happy, you're happy. What do you want? There's nothing, not only happy. Oisher is maybe not the right translation. It's probably, we have to think of how it's said in whatever. I mean, what it means is good. The only real good is to know God. So when you say that I don't have children, so therefore, once you know God, there's no real questions anymore. In the sense of, because everything, that's the only thing that's really good. And all the other things are just random. So you don't even need him to save you. Of course, there's the
The Torah doesn't need to be wrong with that.
no, of course, the Ramaz is for the Torah, because of course the Torah, that's not the Chashiva. Of course, it's not entirely true, because you can't actually have. This is where there's a certain bracha in the whole Shut as Rambam, because you can't actually have Yediyas Hashem without having a good life by Mazeh, because at least by Mazeh, because in order to think you need to have Yeshvadas and so on. That's the Rambam Pshat and Einish by Mazeh Bechlal in the Chashiva. He says, and here it says it many times or more than once in Bersh Mashnais and the Chashiva. It says that the Schav of Torah is a to be able to know God. In other words, part of the Einish is, so in that sense you do need it to be good. If you only have Eve's life and you never have this Asuga, then you're taka having a bad life, because you don't have that good either. But this seems to be what he says here also. That's the Rambam's ultimate pshat in which is that if the rule will be a way to understand God, or even if it's not a way, it's totally irrelevant, then it's irrelevant. Then it's basically saying there's not really a rule. This is where the Rambam gets the most radical, closest to like the Chassidish thing of everything actually being good. And he actually quotes Kol David Rachman Letava of it. But the important thing is, and it's also important.
It's not important.
Exactly, but that's actually, by the way, that's also what it says in Tanya. People keep on confusing this. And the Tanya then goes on to say that it's the Ratoiv Nister. I don't know what that even means. The Tanya, when he really quotes this, it really says that in the Skil Chabin, it says this. It says that everything, the only good thing, the only valuable thing is knowledge of God, or whatever he calls it, the exact language. And therefore, whether you do have it or you don't have it is wrong. And therefore, you should not be happy. And this is also, I know for some reason you only say this when it's chizik, because nobody wants to, rain on anyone's parade. But according to the same shtickle says, you should not be happy when your son gets married, or when you got married, or whatever, when you have a baby, because that's just the mazah. The smart people don't care about that. The Rambam actually was really thought like this. Again, he was not focused on a mensch, but besides for being a mensch, besides neshama, the Rambam says, the Rambam says that you have to do everything in Hashem Shemayim, yeah? And very famous parak in Luchas Dais, right? It says like this, he shouldn't have children. Of course, having children is a mitzvah, but he doesn't ignoring that, right? You shouldn't have children like another person. You should have children. Something like that. Luchas Dais, okay? No. So he's actually very consistent in no, I don't remember where it is. I never remember where it is exactly. And the parak about Kol Dechachadai. Oh no. So basically, there's no use in having children unless they're going to know God. Now, of course, we have to have a lot of children so that one should know God. So we're playing a numbers game. Okay, I don't find it. It's one of this program. We're playing a numbers game, right? But that's really what he believes. Ultimately, that's really what he believes. And ultimately, that's probably one of his best. That's like his tiefste theory in the end for why not to care about anything besides for knowing God.
Yeah, but so let's just go back to the original thing over there. So
Okay.
Right?
The Kitzur was. Oh, there's another whole drusha we have to say about the fast masa, about how that actually is supposed to work. That's another whole thing.
I mean, so how it could become right hashgacha. I mean.
Yeah, not talking about that, but what it actually means with Paul, because it's very important to realize that it has to connect somehow to what's going on. You can't. It's not about. But this is another unrelated to any of the thing. I mean, it's somehow related to what I said in the beginning. In other words, I wanted to get the Yifash Mass of being real. The Ramam, this is already a whole chettel. It's already nicht natilach. I think that you could read it being real. I don't think it's crazy actually, but that's something that needs to be explained better. How it would work.
The last thing you said.
No words. No shaykhs to anything. No shaykhs to anything that I said. I think that it's also in the Rambam and Al-Khastanis and other places. No, the other point that I had to say is that it can't be, and I think this is part of what makes people confused, but you say drushas like, I don't know why it happened, but can't be a bad thing to be machbar a negelvasser. No, now you're just verdrying a cup. If it didn't happen about that, then shut up. Then it's not about this. The whole idea of Yifash Shemasa was actually to connect things and actually to try to make things better by becoming better. That's the whole theory. Now, I just will give you like a wild Ramam theory for how it should work. Forget about that theory. According to your theory, it has to be true. And therefore, as much as you're just throwing things at the wall, or everyone is finding their pet issue and connecting it to that, it's not a big at. Do you really believe that's what it's Tulian? No, so then there's nothing to do. Then you stop saying things. Then you're not only stop saying things, you don't understand the whole dekide bichlal. You think that it's tam in the weltaran. And I think that the most basic thing is that and if you want to do something like that you have to separate very clearly who it's about and who is it for and what is it for. In other words, right? That's not a hard thing to do. I don't think anyone says, I don't know what it's about. You know what? Like Rabbi Alta says, you're the perfect person. It's very hard to find. Not a problem. And I think that it's like this. I think this is important because I could talk about personally. Personal in the sense, for a person individually, when he has a tzura or whatever, I think that it's the correct thing to find what he did wrong and fix it. And he probably knows more or less what it is. It's not hard. And it's true that you do a lot of things wrong and you also know which one it is. It's totally complicated. It's schwer zu verstehen. And if not, you do what Yifash Shemasa literally means this. Figure it out. Fine. If it's not, then it's bittul toir. It's always said what you'll do if you find, if your mama should tzaddik, then we'll talk about Yisir Shlahava, then we'll talk about Gilgilim. That's the said. And the Rabban talks about this. When you're not up to that, then why you drang me a cop that it's tzaddik virale. It's tzaddik. So it's very funny that everyone jumps to this tzaddik virale. You can't start tzaddik. The Rabban says this. Of course, you think it's not proportionate. Okay. You know what? I think there's a lot of things that are proportionate. So we could work on those. Now, when things happen, that is very, very personal. I think on a very local level, I think it could work 100%. And again, we could do the theology and the theory of how it works, however it works. It's real. If you're talking about something for a ganze Oilem, then you have a big problem. And nicht jeder ist dasselbe. We can do that. I heard that the Square Rebbe, the old Square Rebbe would do something in Square, the shield burned down or something like that. And the English Rabbunim, whatever, the Rabbunim came to him and they said they should make Atzeres. Not much. Everyone knows what they have to do. Bring it. Mamash not Maxim to do any of this kind of thing. And I don't know, I never say on the Square Rebbe's Shekla Dat, but I think he's representing a certain very straight tradition here. And so far as you think that, yes, everyone should be mashra myself, you really think that they need you, Chochem, to tell them something? To put mezuzah there? Everyone knows what they have to do. He set up the language, whatever. It's the language that we use for these things, right? Everyone knows. What's the right stack up? You don't trust us? What was the problem? If you don't trust me, then it's not going to help your drusha either. That's one thing. And second thing is that it's obvious, it's fetish in the Rambam, and insofar as things are din al tzibur, and we could be choike, which if every tzur is al tzibur, I don't think every tzur is al tzibur. I think that I'm sort of going to stop here because I think that if the Yidak kol chabir, right, things like that, right? Yidak kol chabir, right? Yeah, let's say you're part of a shul and someone dies, or you're part of a wider community. How as wide as your community goes, right? And something happens. It's not clear to me that it's always a din in a certain sense. Like the Yidak kol chabir says that in some sense it's a din on the, as close as you are. That's also a din on you. So mitzadat, you achieve whatever you find. But that's also a very small local level thing, right? But I think most of chayvas atzibur, it's very important for me. Most of chayvas atzibur is not that. If again, let's make a basic Excel sheet for the Bezen Shel Mala. I don't think, right? When some guy dies, is sick, loses his money, right? Obviously, like 98% of it is a din on him. According to Hilchas Chavash. Okay, again, when we'll get to the tzaddik, we'll talk about it. Meanwhile, we're talking about the binary. Binary. It's lemara chatov. Now, yes, it's true that also in some sense it's a din ala. Yira atzma shloisha yomem keili. It's cherev nachat atzavore. This whole keili, right? It's a keili, right? Kol shloisha yom rishonim dechaptila kol chabir. Okay, that's like 2% of it, right? So he has to do 98% of the tshiva, not of the tshiva. Most of it, other people they'll do psakabud toeva. No, I'm trying to say that this makes sense. You see. But actually, that's mitzat. No, but mitzat shani, the tzibur at 98% of chayvas at tzibur is actually my klal number 1. Heshtat fiz betzar. The whole point of being a tzibur is that it matters when other people die also. 98% of what the tzibur has to do is just that you have tragedies that happen and there's not even a hesped. And to say that a list of a virus that happens, that's not hesped. You know what hesped means? It means make people cry. It says in Shech Sibis you have to bring music. I don't know why nobody does it anymore. When it says in Shech but I don't care. Yeah? What? Nachamol means people that can make you cry. Only the English still do it a little bit. In the Litvish, Levi's, but I don't know what. They want to make you do tshiva. They're all confused.
No. She was speaking there, and he just started crying because and it was like a different thing. He was crying, and everyone else crying.
Well, that's the halacha. That's the koved mask, whatever it is. Hesped is to make people cry. By the way, that's why the kind of hesped that we do, you could do on Yom Tov Achet. I'm serious. No shayach for the hesped. And the Rosh Hashanah was kaskel. I'm nothing wrong with it. It's just not hesped. In other words, you're missing the first step. You're you didn't say a hesped yet. Maybe you did because the newspapers give a spite. No, but really. They're just giving drushas. But it's not the main thing. I think that most of Chovot, that's very important to me. We seem to have the opposite. That the Mishpucha, they're mostly sad and everyone else should do tshiva. No, the Mishpucha should do tshiva and everyone else should be sad. People keep on going with this. It's mind-boggling how, like, it's not like a pshat from Devin Ezer that nobody knows. It's like a pusik chemish. Everyone knows how Davi died. Nachamol, there's a shalef, the chet was yayin. One of those three things, okay? Yeah, whatever they didn't exactly. Again, the machloikus tanuim, speak the machet dinam so. They did very dangerous stuff. And they bring the Eish Zura, okay? Machst dich mashigem, man weiß gar nicht geht. That's what wieder maharan is. And he has to be Hashem. However, that could exactly means, Rashi sagt, din bechweis. Maybe that's not the only pshat. Whatever it means, it doesn't mean that it's random. He has to be Hashem bekvoidei hakodesh al pnei kolam hakovet. So Rashi has one pshat that says it's like chita sara. So we learn from this how chumad din is, or may you make a different pshat that it's chveis. It shows the kvod so more push the pshat. But everyone, we still know what happened. It's not saying that's a tekinim. The kvod doesn't mean God is some kind of crazy thing that he likes killing people because that makes him happy and tamtukas adinim. No such a thing. By the way, Lida in Chemesh, and this is something that someone told me after. Lida means to receive an answer. Or to wait for receive an answer, or after receiving an answer. Achlalim Demuya Nafshi means I'm waiting for an answer. It has a certain specific mashmuas in Tanakh. Demuya is not being silent. Because what does it mean? Achlalim Demuya Nafshi. What does it even mean? Achlalim Demuya Nafshi. I think it means And someone, I have to look it up, someone proved it to me from Fshin and Makaris. It generally means receiving an answer or waiting an answer. It's just the opposite of what all these Darshanim say. And he accepted, that's what it means. He accepted, at least in context, it means something like that. He accepted the answer. Oh, okay. Versteht. And then the whole Beis Yisrael Yifki. In other words, you do tshiva, and that's literally what it says. Davre laharen, kan sich steh yain, right? You do tshiva. Everyone else, what's that? What would be nowadays would be like this. The Kahanims and the Heilig. Chaz v'shalom, I can't share the Kahanim. And it's true, they actually got that Shiros HaShechina going. Not like today that who knows if the guy, who is the Bechlal the Tzaddik. They're taking the Tzaddikim. They're taking Haran, they're taking made the Shiros HaShechina. It worked. That's what they would say. They're Heilig. But the Oilem, in Zachet. Everyone should check their resistance at home. What does it actually say? Pink Tvaket. The Kahanim, they know what they have to do. They'll do their kvira, they'll eat the guys eat the carb, nicht eat the carb, they'll stop they'll next week they'll be more nizer and that's literally achre mois, right? Yeah? You're not going to make the bizarre, they won't see all these things that we learn. That's what they're gonna do. Everyone else, right? He did something wrong, he did nothing wrong. Yeah, you'll know, it's schrecken, but you're not gonna do anything, you're just gonna cry. That's every touch.
So in this case, both about coffee, but what kind of coffee comes out of this?
No, sicher nicht. We're just saying words that mean nothing.
Yeah.
This macht a Kiddush Hashem. How does it make a Kiddush Hashem? It's some nonsense. Noch einmal, even Rabbi Kiva.
The meiste Oilem Tage is today also. The Oilem didn't need so much stories to be because Oilem was.
That the title, the pictures do that. The pictures do that.
What?
The pictures do that.
Yeah,
the WhatsApp macht das. The WhatsApp macht damit für der Reise. And the Rabbunim ze machen öfter und tchshash der Rabbunim, ich weiß was. Maybe bikhlal the dvorim what they're doing. No, I'm serious. Take apsay voling a mam, sagt mir das soll ich hacken kaparan. Why? His mom is no, the Gemara says that anas I had them does anas dvorim shlem like der sham khvar ev. There's always a chash anas dvorim in that. It's not and from the accent, maybe sometimes you do, maybe Shala, Kira, how to understand the stira to Gemara and that. It's not an easy thing to tell someone that. Again, Mr. said that, to say that, ich weiß, ich sage nicht, but ich sage, yeah, you know, this game, ich sage nicht, ich kann nicht, but Lamas, it's because of your tzitzis, you know. Come on. What's my tzitzis got to do with it? In any case, what I wanted to get more, that's just one part of the issue. What I wanted to get more specifically is that if Alatzad of Ifil there's something that's exayra ala prat, and the klal is he's part of the prat, part of the klal, so they either call a chabura, so they're mode, but that's 2% and 90% they're mishtatev b'tzad, right? Like Hesped, Hesped al-Moshe Rabbani, and so on. Chiv Hesped, and Chiv Hesped is what? I don't think Chiv Hesped has to do with Chiva, and then maybe the Rambam would say, mostly has to do with crying. Yifkud, say Yispede, it's not, doesn't say it's already. Right? Then, that's one thing. Now, if there's something that is exayra ala klal,
in the klal is fix something.
Exactly. Then don't reinish and cup. We should get the Rabbunim and tell them what to do. Maybe. Ich weiß nicht. Or at least I'm actually specific about this, but at least it's mashma like that in the Ramil Chastanet, then it had a dik that's not mashma like that, but it's mashma that and that the only thing that you need to do, but without being mashma, it's still this sort of like this. Is fix general things.
General things
what exactly is the level of a chatas atzibur? No, the chatas ayochid. What you want examples? I could give you a list. That's not the problem. What I'm saying is that that's the only thing that makes sense. Again, if you believe that this Yifash Masov is real, if it's fake, then I'll get in Piran. Exactly. Then Ladochov with all the Tilasidaims and the Makal Shabbos early. That's nice mitzvahs. That's the Kashayach is mit Gornish. If there's a Gezaira ala Tzibbe, then it's up to the Tzibbe. Now the Tzibbe is represented by all the Yechidim and the Manigim and whatever, but it's up to the Tzibbe to be Mfash B'Maseh at Tzibbe. I think that it's the fetish. There's like that makes sense. There's maybe the ikim otherwise because there's Rav, there's maybe a Rav. If Rav people are sinning, then ich weiß nicht. It does say Lamasa. That's what the Chayres looks like, and there's actually now again Chatat Hasib Krosa mean that we didn't care about some Yochid. There could be a lot of things. Yeah. Yeah, all right. And
so the Rami Pano says, who is the Zokin that was the Smile?
No, it has a Gilgal.
Abadet, no. The Shamas Abadet even like Gilgal.
Yeah.
He was a Gilgal, it's unbelievable. But he was a Gilgal from the Shlish by Elisha.
Yeah, I saw that.
And he also,
In the
Shlish from the, he was a Shlish, and he was a Gilgal from the Sarah Oifim.
What was the Sarah Oifim?
Because the Sarah Oifim, I mean, you have to see there's a Medrash. The Medrash, you ever...
Chab du alles.
I thought I saw it ahead.
No. Tell me no.
No, the Medrash said that the Sarah Oifim somehow gave like a pseudo law to Yosef.
Okay.
If Yosef gave him back a bit, the whole son of the Medrash, he told him pseudo toiva, the yayin, so he answered him, and so somehow here also, since he was like Eino in the way he touches it up is somehow that he was like he's Trugim and Klal Yisrael, and that's why he was in Smaich.
What, because it was a Gilgal of that guy? What did this look in himself? What did he do?
He was B'shas this look in himself, and he when he was there B'shas the Uchlis and the Klal Yisrael, he's Eina in the Grois Kar of Klal Yisrael. Like he didn't like hell Klal Yisrael like Roy the Kar.
How does he know that?
What?
Well, the Gilgal, I know how he knows. It makes sense. It's a very similar story.
Yeah, I went to the Oifim was also because
that I don't know.
It was like Lechem or something.
I didn't see that part. I saw the part with the
those people only looked in the back of the they look at the bottom.
You can look it up. It's probably in his book somewhere.
No, I know. Everyone get it. Oh, one second. One more really good thing I saw. This I guarantee someone no one saw. I looked over the Ozhev over in. Where did I look it up? Oh, Malachim. Like on the pasuk over there, he takes to a different Sache from the Shloah Kodesh. You have Bear Moshe on this?
I'm stammen, wie heißt das nur als was?
No, she says you see that the Rami Panel is coming something from the Shloah Kodesh. She's bringing something from Avraham Halevi, who's still like Savyat Noishim. There's like a whole thing behind this.
What, with this Sholish person?
Like, what?
This Yid that was Nismach? What do you say
this
from
whole
there?
thing where did he get this whole thing that this either the smell? What was his problem? Like, what did he do wrong?
Who?
The first one, the Shlish. Like, what was his?
Because you didn't believe the Novi, ich weiß.
No,
what's the cipher called?
He said Aruba Seshamayim. The El Moshe Torah from the Ozhev.
There's thousands of El Moshes.
Parish wrote it on the Parish. No, it's in the Epstein.
His name is Epstein.
Some of the Ozhev is Epstein. Yeah, Bel Moshe. In Malachim. Yeah, the Ramban, where's the Ramban? He didn't make this, he made this.
It's the other way around, no?
Why is it?
Ich weiß nicht.
So it was 500 years ago.
You read him?
It was only 400 years ago.
No, stop. Noch einmal. Emes schwer, why did this guy die? Oh, you're saying, no, okay. The eine Ru, you're saying, has to do with that. According to his Tishtal, he sings his Tishtal and get. Maybe this is based on something. I see. Maybe there's an earlier makar for this pshat also. Because he said, how could it be? So the shala is what the Avel was the rap because he doesn't believe that it could be a nest. Or it's like, of course that could be a nest, but how could it be for you? I hear.
But here's the thing we hear, they leave out the thing with for some reason. If they go to the Shabbos,
doesn't really do anything for us, this.
No, I'm bringing up this, everyone's saying the Smayach, this Smayach business
is...
Sounds like it wasn't so good. It's not so good to be in the Smayach.
Who said it's good? What's the question? Someone said that it's good?
No, it's a
Shaykhis, noch einmal, the Mishnah, it's fakir, I don't understand. What's the Shaykh? I don't think so. I don't think anyone thinks that. It says like the Sar Oifim, as Shien. He has Sholish, and Nimras Bashavi Yemes, Dvar Elisha. Wenn Hashem weiß, okay, wir können es da,